Hey everybody, this is James. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at Leap. I know we've got a lot of people filtering in. Today we're going to be covering our secure payment capture with our special guest, John Chambers, who's the owner of LeafGuard of Indiana. John's a power user of both Leap as well as the secure payment feature. Has been doing so for a while now. So we're going to go ahead and kick this thing off in the next couple minutes. We'll probably realistically get started at about 5 after, but that'll give us enough time to go through and take care of everything we need and let everybody who wants to attend get a chance to sign in and get geared up. Throughout this, you guys, we're going to be engaging your feedback. So in the GoToWebinar panel that you should all see on your screens, there are 2 sections that we're going to be using. One is the question section. So feel free to dive in and ask questions as you see fit. See a couple of you've already thrown some stuff in there. That's a shout out to you, Brad. I see that. Feel free to throw in your questions at any given time, you guys. If it's totally relevant to what we're talking about for that time, I'll absolutely pull those in. If not, we've got a dedicated Q&A section toward the end. So feel free to chime in at any given time and add those. Don't hold back. We're all about it. The more interactive this is, the better it is, and the less anyone's likely going to fall asleep. The other thing we're going to do too, you guys, is there's another section called polls. So we are going to throw a couple questions to you guys in the polls section. So watch for those things to come up. You'll definitely hear me announce those out. It should be pretty clear and easy to pull up. So just note to self, that stuff's going to be there. So I'll give everybody probably another 2 minutes to join, and then we'll get this thing kicked off and rolling. Hey, Alfonso, I saw you write in, will the webinar be recorded? The answer to that, absolutely. But feel free to say, we'd love to have you. That was not an invite to jump off. Anyway, all right, guys, so we got about 1 minute and we'll kick this thing off. Something. All right, let's get this thing started. So on our end, you guys, one of the things that we're really excited about is this is the first in a series of webinars that we're going to be hosting. Aha, good. I saw you staying, Alfonso. Thank you. Anyway, so this is the first in a series of webinars that we're going to be starting. All right, we're going to call these the Leap Academies, and what it's going to do is it's going to take each one of the features that we have within Leap, which we've got a number of, you know, from estimates to contracts, proposals, you name it. What we're going to do is we're going to take each one of these individual features and we're going to start highlighting both best practices from the audience at large, but more important than anything, because we all know that the last thing anyone ever wants to see again and again and again is us doing a demo of something and telling you how wonderful it is. Frankly, we don't want to do that. It's annoying on all sides, and at the end of the day, the most value you guys are going to get by attending one of these is to understand how people like yourself, your peers, are using this in the field. So what we're going to be doing is each and every time we do one of these, we're going to bring in a new Leap user who happens to be a power user in that specific feature. Today, for example, we're joined by John Chambers, owner of LeafGuard of Indiana. He actually has a number of different organizations within his mothership, if you will, each one of them using Leap, each one of them utilizing the secure payment feature. In fact, he's one of the stronger that we have on the platform right now. Again, he completely understood this from day one, took the dive straight in, made the transition over, and frankly, he's doing incredible things with it. So we're really excited to have him on today. He's going to be chiming in as well. John, can you hear us right now?
I sure can.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Glad we got the microphones all working.
Thank
So
you,
yeah,
James.
John's going to be joining us today. Again, he's owner of LeafGuard of Indiana and just a superstar when it comes to using both Leap as well as this feature. So without further ado, let's get this thing kicked off and dive straight in. If anyone can't see my screen or for some reason technology completely fails us and I go muted, throw it in the questionnaire. We'll be able to see that real quick and let you know and troubleshoot on our end. So without further ado, let's kick this thing off. So first thing we're going to cover today, guys, we're going to do a little bit of an industry overview. So in order to understand why we created this feature in the first place, we have to understand where credit cards sit within our space. There's a ton of people on this call from all different walks of life, all different types of companies, different products, roofing, bathrooms, gutters, you name it. There's a ton of different things that people sell within the Leap ecosystem. Literally every single product type or home renovation is covered. With any Leap user, if we tried to put them all together, you could literally build an entire custom house with just users of Leap. So we're going to take a look at the industry overview and understand what role credit cards play. We're also going to take a look at what it means to be PCI compliant. Why do these rules exist, and what's the reason behind a lot of the regulatory initiatives? Next, we're going to dive in and show you exactly what the feature looks like. It's a really quick and concise overview on if I plan on plugging this into my business, what does it look like, exactly how does it function, and then more importantly, and the reason everybody's here, we're going to pass the mic over to John. None of you want to hear me ramble on for an hour. I would love to hear John ramble for an hour simply because what he's doing is way more impressive than what I do on a day-to-day basis. So again, that's where we're ultimately getting to. John's going to chime in. We're going to do a little bit back and forth. He'll talk about his journey with this, how he operates secure payment capture within his business. And then lastly, guys, we want to open it up to you as the audience, as a forum. Ask away. This is the perfect time to ask both John and myself really, really concise questions. Whatever the hell you want to know, ask away. We're going to be doing an open Q&A, so feel free to drop any questions throughout. If we don't answer them while doing the presentation, we'll pull them into that section at the end. So without further ado, let's keep rocking. So the industry overview as a whole, again, we want to start taking a look at a macro view of what role credit cards play. And the first thing that we need to take a look at is in this space, there's an overarching theme that exists with any time you bring up payment processing is data security. It's one of the hottest topics in education right now. Data security is arguably one of the biggest degree plans that exist in the education space, let alone it's something that every single company is pressing, whether it's home improvement, banking, government, you name it. Data security and data integrity is paramount. You can see these are just a number of breaches that occurred in the last 10, 12 years, numbering in the billions. You know, the breach of Yahoo in 2013, you know, that led to the ultimate demise of the CEO or the CMO, excuse me. So when you look at these things, like the implications of these data breaches, while these are just some massive organizations that everybody recognizes, it's the amount of people affected in this is staggering. You know, Marriott alone, that's more than the population of the United States. So with that said, data is a massively hot topic right now, as well as identity theft. So when we go through, we got to ask ourselves, well, what does that matter? Does everybody use credit cards? Well, looking at the ecosystem of the home improvement space, we have to also recognize that there's a massive shift in what's happening in home purchasing. You know, millennials, and this is something we've used this slide on a number of other decks, but the reason being is because it truly paints a picture of where the space is going. Cities are expensive. You know, when you look at the most expensive places that anyone can live, it's going to be inside the city. So a lot of new home buyers, a lot of people who are creating young families are moving to the burbs. They're moving to places where their home is affordable. And unfortunately, what you're finding with that is they're also moving into places that have aging inventories. You know, they're not buying those brand new tear down craftsman homes or those brand new custom bespoke builds. They can't afford that. They're going to buy the house that they can't afford, which ultimately needs to be upgraded. So when you look at this, the industry is ripe for the picking But we also have to recognize that person that's purchasing is ultimately becoming more of a millennial than ever. It's not the baby boomers. It's not that Gen X. It's the millennial generation. And you got to ask, well, why is the millennial generation using credit cards? Well, first and foremost, credit cards are more convenient than ever. Every single credit card that's out there has these amazingly enticing commercials with Alec Baldwin walking across the screen telling you that you get a dollar for every dollar you spend, or not really, but you get a percentage for every dollar you spend. So it's looking at that, there's a ton of incentives. If I'm smart enough to do the math and say, I've got a $10,000 job and I get a 2% cash back, great. I just saved 2% on the purchase that I was going to make, and it's no skin off my back. And then for other people, like my wife and I, we do this all the time. If we have to do a simple upgrade or a simple addition on something and we can afford to pay for it in cash, I sure as hell am not going to pay for that in cash, because I can get a couple free flights out of it, or I can get some hotel points, or whatever it might be. Usually I don't get to see those because I'm not the one who controls that side of the business. But long and the short of it is, we know that if I pay that off at the end of the day, it's the same as cash, but I just got a ton of advantage and upside from it. So when we look at this, today's consumers are smart enough to recognize that I can milk it. From there, we also have to look at the statistics for this. And, according to a 2018 study, 1 in 3 uses a credit card to pay for home renovations. That might not be all of it, but they're going to use it in some way, shape, or form. The other side of that is the millennials that we just talked about, who are really starting to have that most statistically significant increase in the home purchasing market. But they're the ones who are most inclined to use it. So the data itself is pointing toward a market that's ripe for credit card processing. So from there, we also have to start going back and saying, all right, next steps. More importantly, what's the market look like? $148 billion in 2017 was spent via credit card on home improvement. That's a lot of money. That is a massive chunk that everybody is ultimately hungry to get a piece of. So again, looking at that, the market is definitely there. So you have to be prepared for it. So now let's talk a little bit about PCI compliance. All right. So what is it? What is PCI? What does that acronym stand for in the first place? So there's two common definitions that you're going to hear. First one is obviously pretty self-explanatory. It's personal credit information. That's one of the acronyms that you'll typically see. The other is more used for the regulation side. This is the payment card industry. Usually you hear it as payment card industry standards. So PCI standards or PCI compliance. All right. Both of them are accurate. But what you have to know is at the end of the day, it all relates back to your customer's credit information. So it's all, like I said, it's a set of rules that are specifically designed to protect your borrowers or your customers, specifically their personal information, from falling into the hands of the bad guys. So with that said, Webster's definition aside, let's keep rocking. What we've done is we've also gone back and said, all right, this could be the most elaborate, boring, tangent-driven webinar that you've ever been on, but we wanted to make it really simple for you to boil these things down to 3 main things when asking yourself, what am I doing to ensure that all of my customers have the most secure process? What are they doing for the most secure process? And it boils down to 3 main things. It's the people, it's your business's processes, and it's the technology that you're leveraging. All 3 of those have to be looked at together. You can't look at those things individually, because if you do, you're going to miss them. You're going to miss one or the other. So the people, who has access to your stuff? Again, a lot of businesses that we work with are family owned and operated. It's not necessarily your brother or your cousin or your niece or your son or your daughter that's sitting next to you. It's every single other person. It could be the person walking by on the sidewalk who glances in the truck window and sees a signed contract with a credit card written on it on the front seat. That's a person. You've got to take that into consideration. What people have access to that personal information? And then the processes. It's when you collect this data, what processes do you have in play to ensure that you're doing everything you need to do to be compliant? If I call a card into the office, what's the process by which they enter that into the processing machine? Or the terminal? Are they writing it down on a sticky note, or are they simply typing it in? One of those is compliant, one of them is not. And then lastly, it's the technology. It's what devices or what technology are you leveraging to truly ensure that both your people and your processes, ultimately your business, is doing the best it possibly can to secure the data of your customers. So those are the three things that we're going to take a look at. All right. So before we dive into everything, we also have to talk a little bit about the risks. All right. Because the risks are some of these things are just, oh yeah, well, it only matters if I get caught. Yeah, but what happens when you get caught? A lot of these things you look at, there was a statistic I read while doing research for this, is it said, 50% of the data breaches happen in small businesses because usually their security is that much more open and it's that much easier to hack. A world-class hacker that can get into the government database or into Experian or Equifax, they're not going to have a real hard time cracking your router. If they did, they're probably not that good of a hacker. So with that said, a lot of that happens at small businesses. So let's talk a little bit about the risk, okay? There's four main buckets that, the Consumer Financial Protection Agency takes a look at, and it's these four levels at different transaction amounts that they regulate against. So again, you have level 1, 2, 3, and 4. A lot of people think, well, if I'm level 4 and I'm in that bucket, I'm okay. Maybe. The more secure you can be, the better, obviously. But let's keep cracking on. Three main things can happen if you have some sort of data breach. All right, there's financial penalties. And when we talk about these, they're pretty staggering. So when we look at it at a high level, the financial penalties that you're going to incur, not only, let's say you have a breach and someone steals a Visa, a credit card number from one of your customers. Let's say it was a $10,000 breach. Well, first things first, Visa is going to charge you $10,000 because you're liable. If you're not compliant, guess what? You're negligent. So they're going to charge you a penalty or a fee in the amount of whatever you were charged. The customer is scot-free. They've got coverage. That's what Visa guarantees. The Visa's not going to pony up that cash. They're going to come get it from you. Two, you're going to be charged penalties. So until you fix your compliance, until you fix your processes, your people, and your technology, they can charge you for the first 3 months $5,000 to $10,000 a month, depending on the size of your business. If that goes from 3 to 6 months, that suddenly gets kicked up, and at that point, you're looking at $25,000 to $50,000 a month, depending on the size of your business. And if that continues beyond 7 months, you're talking between $50,000 and $100,000 a month just in penalties until you fix your processes. So not only are you looking at some pretty substantial upfront fines, it's continuous until you fix the problem. So while some of that stuff for some of you guys might not seem like that much at the beginning, if I get a $10,000 breach, yeah, it's going to suck, but at the same time, I'll survive. Yeah, that's not all you're paying. The other thing you run is you run the risk of losing credit card processing. And I'm going to chime in real quick. Hey, John, on your end, what percentage of your business uses credit cards, would you say?
Well, at least 40%, and I would say 60% use it for either the down payment or the final payment. But I would say 40% use it for both, the entire job.
Great. So if we're looking at just that 40%, 60% aside, maybe they write you a check instead. If we're talking about that 40% that use this to pay for their entire job, a 40% reduction in your business is pretty much a death sentence. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, you guys, losing the ability to process credit cards is a pretty serious infraction. And then lastly, at the end of the day, you're never going to escape the damage that it puts on your reputation. So people write reviews. If someone gets scorned and they say, oh, this idiot lost my credit card, guess what? Anyone who reads that, I'm not the type of person that goes in and reads the good reviews. I'm the type of person that goes and says, oh, they received 3 bad reviews. What happened? I'll read the 3, not the 300 good ones. So if that's the case, really got to watch that stuff, because reputation is something that cannot be fixed very easily. So let's dive in. We're going to speed along through this section because a lot of this is pretty much well-known and no-brainers. But let's take a look at the different ways in which people are currently capturing payments that we see. So oftentimes we run into these 5 as our main methods. Card swipers. People say, oh, yeah, well, I'm secure. I use Square. Okay. You know, or hey, I call the credit card into the home office. They put it into the terminal and run the payment. You write the credit card down on paper, which makes us cringe and is terrifying every time we hear it. But literally, I would say that happens 30% of the time when we speak with businesses. Paper checks is another common one, oftentimes because people don't want to pay the ACH processing fees. And then number 5, it's online payment portals. So they've figured out a way through their website to just say, cool, hey, sign on the dotted line, customer, and go make your first payment by logging in and putting in your payment information. So a lot of these have I would say there's some pros and there's a lot of cons to these. Card swipers, for example, you want to go make another payment, you got to go out and swipe that card again. You can't store the payment. So you have to factor in the time that you're taking off of the plates of any of your employees to continue selling. Or, you know, again, whether or not you have connectivity or anything like that. Home office, if they write it down on a sticky note, not secure. If there's insecure airways going over, or if you're not on a PCI compliant phone system, same thing. If the call's being recorded, those recordings better be stored in a PCI compliant way, otherwise you're negligent. Credit card on paper, we're not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole because we all know it's terrible, and I guarantee some of you on this call are doing it. No shame yet. And then the accepting the paper check thing. It's when you look at the impact that using an electronic processor or secure payment processor can add to your business. So, you know, the benefits of that can be rapidly speeding up your cash flows. It can also be not having to, again, go back out to that home office. If a check bounces, you have to go hunt that down. So again, the accounts receivable portion of this becomes pretty staggering. And then online payment portals, again, same as paper checks, you're relying on that customer to make the activity rather than taking control of your business. So let's keep rocking. That's exactly what we just talked about: slower cash flows, reliance on the customers, and just compromise data. So what I want to show you real quick is I'm going to switch over. I'm actually going to be sharing over my screen so that all of you guys can see exactly what this looks like. Give me 2 seconds while I shift. All right, can you guys see my screen? All right, so here's what we're going to take a look at. We're actually going to go ahead and take a look at, sorry guys, we're going to take a look at this. So this is basically where we would have, you know, in this case, I actually went ahead and I built a roof out for any one of our customers. So in this section, what you'll note is I've built the roof. I've got everything I needed done. I got my financing selected. I'm now ready to take this person to contract. So what I do when I do this is I obviously go into my contracts, and this is just one of the templates that I've pre-populated out. I filled out all my information. Hey, we're going to sell this job at $35K. This person's going to pay 25 grand out of pocket. They're going to put a cash deposit down of $500 today, and then the balance of that is just going to be spread out over time. They're going to finance that 10 grand. They don't want to pay out of pocket with that because they're actually able to get really good rates. So anyway, that's the scenario that we've laid out. I'm going to show you guys exactly how secure payment works within Leap. So when I go to this form of payment selection, I can either choose check, and if I choose check, you'll note I can go ahead and I can put in my ACH information, or in this case, what I can do, and I'll show you this one, works the same exact way for each one of them. I can select my credit card, and at this point, I have the ability to come back and actually select and enter in my credit card information. If I wanted to, I can actually hold it up and I can scan that credit card and it'll automatically pull in those numbers. Or what I can do is I can just enter those in manually. So if I say, here's me, I'm going to enter my info. Here's my credit card information. Feel free to write this down and try and buy things. I will laugh when it declines. I can go ahead and put in my CVV, zip code. When I hit done, it's super important at this point that you guys understand what's happening. Is two main events have just occurred. Number one, what it's done on here, and you can see this with that little green dot, on my actual contract itself, it's encrypted that credit card number. So even though my sales rep in the field, and this goes back to that people, processes, and technology, my rep in the field has used Leap to effectively capture that credit card information. But the benefit of this is even if I were to print this out, it's just going to show a bunch of X's and the last four of that card number. In no way, shape, or form does anyone else have access to that card information. None. Even if I try and pull this back up, it does not give me access to it. So at this point, it's number one, encrypted that card number on my actual application. Two, on the back end, what you don't see is it's also gone back and it's created what's known as a token. All right, that token is just a really fancy way of saying that we've stored that payment information, and that payment information is now living on a level 1 PCI compliant server. And you note that a minute ago we went back through those different levels. Level 1 PCI compliance is designed for companies that are processing north of $6 million in business. So with that said, if you were to use this feature, even if you were just processing $10,000 a year, you have the security of the highest possible level of anyone out there. So again, it's storing that payment information on a level 1 PCI compliant server. So the beauty of that is even if I need to go charge that card 3 times, I can do that. If I, let's say I use QuickBooks, this system can sync up with QuickBooks. So all I have to do on the back end is click charge at my home office. It'll go retrieve that token, charge that card, put the token back in storage. So again, not a soul throughout that entire process has access to that card information. So again, it's 100% secure. Well, nothing's 100% secure, but it's the highest level of security that you can possibly have as a business. So when I hit next, again, this would be an example of that template within my contract. So at this point, you can see here, I have my encrypted card number. All of my other payment information is there. And just like everything else in Leap, you can go back and you can actually sign the contract with your finger. Everything's dandy and done. Boom. So at this point, I've got my signed contract. Everything's fully secure. Even if someone steals my rep's iPad, guess what? They cannot get access to your customer's information whatsoever. So the other thing to note is this works exactly the same way with ACH. So at ACH, if someone was to give you a voided check, great. You don't even need to keep the voided check. All you do is enter their routing number, their bank account number, branch, all that other stuff, checking your savings. All the information that you would need to do that is pre-populated in here. So I can go back and I can shift this. I'll show you guys what it looks like. And it's really easy for me to just fill this information out, hit done, and it does the exact same thing. It's going to encrypt it on the actual application itself. Everything's good and dandy, and you're set to go. So with that said, I'm going to switch back over to our other presentation, and we'll continue. Let's talk a little bit about the cost of this, because again, obviously, this is an extra feature beyond just using Leap. And there's a reason for that. Again, Leap, 100% clear on this one, Leap is not a payment processor. So Leap is the technology that's being used to leverage this feature. So with that said, to use this, it's $150 a month, whether you're a one-user company or whether you're like some of our juggernauts who are well north of 200. It's $150 a month. That's simply coming from the payment processing side of the world. So to use this feature, it's $150 a month. And for each time you capture a payment, at that point, it's $2 to store that payment on the server. That's not $2 every time you process that card. It's $2 just to store the payment. So if you store one payment and charge it 3 times, that costs you $2, not 6. So I want to turn it over. The next bit, as we go through this, again, we just did the demo, it's what about fees? Because included in that, or excuse me, not included in that $150 and $2 per payment capture are the fees. So the fees, you're going to incur that anywhere you go. But I'm actually going to turn this over to John. John can help us out with this. One of the things that we have is we actually partner with well north of 120 different payment processors to use this specific feature. We've also got a number of really awesome partners out there. One of them, just off the top of our head, is WorldPay. Anyone that we've referred to with our partners ends up seeing lower fees. So John, I want to turn it over to you real quick to kind of address this, because I know cost is always going to be a hot topic for any business. The second you hear fees, the second you hear payments or anything like that, it scares the crap out of everyone. So for you, how did you kind of approach this $150 per month and $2 per payment capture? And when we got you set up on this, what were you doing before, and did it end up being less money down the road?
Yeah, well, let me first say that I'm not getting a discount for being on the call. I don't think. I don't even think I'm getting merchandise for being on the call, but
We'll send you a t-shirt, John. We'll send you a t-shirt.
Okay, fair enough. I do love Leap because what they've done for me, and that's why I volunteered to be on the call. I will tell you that if, for the folks on the call, if you're like me, you have a banking relationship, and the banking relationship is very important to you, and they do your deposit accounts and possibly lines of credit, your merchant services as well. And we actually took that away from our bank. We found that the fees were considerably more than what we could get with WorldPay. So regardless of Leap, Leap introduced WorldPay to us, but we were going to switch to WorldPay anyway. So we did see a pretty dramatic decrease in fees. WorldPay is the largest merchant services in the nation, and I think they just make it up in volume. But we have seen a several percent reduction. In the world. Okay, yeah. So we've seen a nice decrease in that. And, you know, at first I told my office manager it's $150 a month and it's $2. You know, she's like, what? But the fees that we've saved through WorldPay, not to mention the PCI compliance, et cetera, as we'll get into here in a bit, it's far exceeded our expectations and decreased our costs overall. So please don't be afraid of that. And if you are currently with your hometown bank that does all of your deposit accounts, your lines of credit, et cetera, know that you're probably not getting the best rates anyway, certainly when you put them up against WorldPay.
Awesome. Thanks, John. So one of the things I want to do real quick, you guys, is I'm going to drop 2 polls in the poll section. So first things first is we want to ask the question, are you guys currently accepting credit cards? So do me a favor, you should see that pop up on your screen real quick. Answer that question real fast. We'll leave that open for about 30 seconds. Would love if you guys could just jump in and respond to that one. Got 36, 44%. All right. Half of you guys are pretty much done with it. Come on, that other half, wake up. Awesome. So I feel like an auctioneer right now. All right, we got 60%. Come on, folks, that other 40, I know you can answer it. It's one click. Do it. But while people are filling that out, thank you again, John, for elaborating on that. I think that the thing to note with this, you guys, is that it never hurts to just have the conversation. You know, we always adhere to the principle of you can't win unless you enter. So just see exactly where you're getting. Anytime we typically talk with any of our customers that are actively using Leap and looking to use this feature, we tell them, look, you know, what are you currently being charged? You know, what are your existing fees right now? Tell us the ins and outs of everything you're currently going through. And the reality is, no one can answer the question. They don't know every penny that's being charged. So when you have these conversations about what you can do next steps, how this all goes in, you know, the thing to note with that is, you know, these guys can tell you exactly what you're doing now versus what they can get you. So it's black and white to whether or not you're going to save money. And it's a very quick calculation to see whether or not you're going to be saving north of $150 per month versus having this thing end up costing you money in the long run. So, all right, we'll close this poll for now. Thank you so much for doing that. And then the next thing we want to do while I turn this over to John to introduce himself. Again, I want to elaborate on how awesome he is for joining this call. But first things first, we're going to open it up too and just ask you guys where, in terms of volume, you guys are processing, because this will help us shape some of the Q&A a little bit down the road. So feel free to chime in that one last thing while I turn it over to John and John does his introduction. So, John, I want to again thank you for doing this. John's been a longtime customer of ours. He's an early adopter and has just been somebody that we've gone to for a lot in terms of preaching what this platform and what this technology can do for a business. So again, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I'm promptly going to shut myself up because I talk a lot. We'll go through this kind of as an interview, but first and foremost, I would love walk us through your business, tell us a little bit more about you, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, James, thank you. Hey, I'm a real life business owner, and you know, when you're a small business owner, you do everything. So right now I'm in the field. So if I cut out or if it's not perfect audio, I apologize. But James, thanks for the opportunity. Bought my business in 2012. I had worked for the company before, and we were doing like $1.5 million. Is probably why they wanted to sell, because it was one of their smaller locations, and it was also a cold market, winter market location. And since that time, we've grown to almost, a little over $8 million in revenue, and we've got 55 employees. So we were one of the early adopters of Leap, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Obviously, Leap is on the cutting edge of technology, and that's somewhat of a cliche, but it's completely accurate in this scenario. We have 15 outside sales reps. And what we were getting into is sales reps. I don't know if you guys agree or have this in your organization, but sometimes they're not the most detail oriented, and they will leave contracts laying around, et cetera. And we did find that they were writing credit card numbers down. And although we're not a big fish in the whole scheme of things, we were pretty worried about it. And we started doing some things where we thought, well, maybe if we actually type the credit card number into the contract in Leap, and then that, James, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. I'm getting into a better area.
Yeah, that's okay. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. So, so in any event, we've got salespeople that aren't the most compliant, and we were just having some struggles, and this has really helped us with our compliance. It's one more facet of our business that we're confident that we're compliant, and we're taking less risk for our 55 employees. Essentially, we're taking less risk, which is fiduciary for everybody, all of our employees and all of our families. So.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro, John. So as we go through this, you guys, we're going to go back to those common themes. So John, talk us through a little bit where you were at in terms of, you mentioned your sales reps. You found that they were writing things on the contracts, or they were writing the credit cards down. What was your old process? So when a rep would go into the field, and this is even pre-Leap or even in the early stages of Leap. So a rep would go out in the field. How are they telling that customer they were going to go ahead and process that payment?
Yeah, we were doing what most people do back in the old days, and it's a credit card authorization form. And that's a fancy term for we were writing it down on a piece of paper. And hopefully it was making it back to the office and sitting on someone's desk, et cetera.
Did you ever run into the issue of losing any one of those credit card authorization forms?
To be honest with you, I don't know, but that's the problem. I don't know.
Yeah, because if you did, that's one of the, and we've had conversations with some of our other customers too. They have lost those things, and they said it's arguably the most awkward conversation they've ever had with a customer. Can we get another one of those credit card authorizations forms from you? Because we don't seem to know where it is. And at that point,
Absolutely.
Again, people have treated that as if someone stole their credit card. And then in terms of technology, obviously you made the jump into Leap a while back. How have you seen this system, especially when paired with this, change your organization?
Well, it has, because remember, even with Leap, there wasn't a great credit card, option. And like I said, we were actually typing it into the contract, which a couple customers said, yeah, that's not the right choice. And that was short-lived, but we were trying to decide what was best. So this has really helped, because it's really buttoned up any compliance issues that we have, certainly on credit cards. And now our entire contract's compliant in that, we ran our contract through our legal department, all the PCI compliance for the credit card. So we feel really buttoned up with this system.
Awesome. And then, so that touches a lot on the biggest of the advantages. And then there's actually one of the questions I'd love if you could chime in on this one too. Being in Indiana, I'm sure you deal with some areas where there's actually no Wi-Fi service. If you go out to some of the remote locations, et cetera, to run some of these jobs. One of the things that we obviously, well, if you don't know, now you do, Leap is fully available to work offline. So what happens is if you put in a credit card payment, or if you're using secure payment capture, you put in that actual payment information, whether ACH or credit card, and you go ahead and hit save, it'll actually create that token, store it on the back end in the cache. At that point, again, no one can access it because it's encrypted. And the second you get back to connectivity, boom, it uploads it to the to that level 1 PCI compliant server. So John, have your reps ever actually run into issues where they don't have Wi-Fi when selling these jobs?
Yeah, we absolutely have. Even the over-air AT&T or Verizon, that's seamless. So it's not an issue at all.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And then in terms of other areas of your business that you've seen improvement, when you switched over to secure payment capture, did you see any changes? And again, if you take ACH or even a credit card, how fast your payment processing or your cash flows were affected?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very seamless system, and because my office people now just go into Leap and process it, it's even quicker than it was with my hometown bank. So.
And are you guys using any additional software on top of Leap for payment processing, like QuickBooks or through CRM?
Through QuickBooks, we do QuickBooks Online, and obviously it's seamless through there as well.
Awesome. So there's no kinks in the hose.
Not yet. It's been 3 months, I guess, 2 months we've been on it. So I'm crossing my fingers, but I'm pretty confident you guys have worked those out just like you have with all the other Leap stuff.
Awesome, cool. Knock on wood that stays the case. And then now let's go into this. You guys, what we want to do is the main takeaway. We want to turn this over. John, in your opinion, what are some of the major pieces of advice that you can give anybody on this call or anyone actively listening to the recording of this later on when they go to make this decision on whether or not secure payment capture is right for them?
Yeah, so we were also doing after the estimators, we would actually when we do the install, we would have what's called these little Clover swipers. And what we found is that everybody's phone was different, and the little dongles didn't match everybody's phone. And then they weren't charged, and then they didn't have signals. So oftentimes we had the installers in the field writing them down as we were talking. And it's changed all that for us because now the installer literally says credit card on file, and that actually means something now. That doesn't mean it's a post-it that's filed in the file or on the office manager's desk. But when we say credit card on file, it's in the file, in the electronic token of the system that we can run there. So believe you me, we bought different little dongle things for the phones. We were thinking about getting our teams all cell phones so that everybody's matched. And then the Clovers, the chargers, it was a large expense. And it wasn't just one time. It was, this one broke, or I can't find this, or what have you. And that helps with the charges too. But this process is less expensive than doing all that and trying to keep up with it. Because before you know it, you give them all out to all the guys, et cetera. And then a month later, they're not being used. You're asking why, and the post-its are coming in again. And it's just, to be as good steward of our business for all of our employees, we felt like we needed the secure. Plus, it makes you look like you're really professional, like all of Leap does, of course, because of the contract layout. But when they see that secure token and the rep actually explains it to them, they think we've really got our stuff together, right? And if we can start that process during the presentation, during the paperwork, they're going to expect us to do it on the install. And then at the end, when we ask for a review, they can say the whole process has been professional and organized. So
that's awesome. And then one other question, I get this question a lot, is anytime we go back, we say, oh yeah, you can use this for credit cards, but it also works for ACH. Are you guys actively using this for the ACH functionality, or are you just doing credit cards currently?
We're just doing credit cards, but I would like to talk to you about the ACH functionality.
All good. You guys,
offline.
one of the reasons why I brought that up, again, number one, credit cards honestly are probably the lowest hanging fruit for this. A lot of people ask, where do I start? How do I get going? Do I have to do both? Do I have to do one or the other? The reality is, start small. The key to adoption with anything that you're going to run into, it comes down to phase out your launches. The more complicated you get before you launch, the more difficult it is for others to pick up. And those others, those are your sales reps. If they're not going to use it in the field, like John said, you're going to start getting sticky notes. So with that said, one of the best things that we've ever seen for any of our customers that start using this feature, start with credit cards. Again, checks are checks. You can deal with that. Again, is it the most secure thing in the world to take a paper check? No. Is it the most responsible thing in the world to do? No. You know, just like John was saying, sometimes sales reps are unorganized and messy. If they're driving down the freeway with the windows open and all of a sudden a $20,000 check gets sucked out the window on the freeway, oops, they're not stopping. You know, and that's, again, a really awkward conversation to have when you go back to the house and say, hey, I need another one. Oops. With that said, you guys, start with credit cards. Get a handle on exactly what fees you're paying. Get a handle on how you're being perceived by your customers, and really focus on building out the security of your business. You guys, all of you, worked your butts off to create what you've created. You know, John, in your case, since 2012, you have worked tirelessly to take on that organization, and you've grown it 8x. So with that said, you don't want to compromise that blood, sweat, and tears on silly mistakes like credit card processing and insecure data. So this is a really quick and easy solution to get that thing done. And ultimately, every single one of the customers that we've set up on it ends up saving money rather than having it cost them anywhere near that $150 a month. So with that said, John, on your end, were there any last-minute parting thoughts? So you guys, I want to open this up for Q&A as John kind of recaps that stuff and we review the questions.
Yeah, no, I just want to tell everybody that even if you think that the fees aren't bad and looks like a pretty good program, then you're thinking about, you know, switching over. And I'll tell you, when we switched from our provider to WorldPay and ultimately through Leap, it was a very quick process. It wasn't arduous at all. And it just took us a day or two filling out some compliance forms, et cetera. And it was made very, very easy. So I would say, you know, just in closing, James, that obviously it never happens to me until that day it happens to me. And we weren't going to wait for that. So.
That's great. Thank you so much, John. So I got a couple questions we're going to throw out. The first one that was asked was, is the $150 a per user or is it a per company? It's actually per company. So again, if you have one rep or if you have 100 reps, it's still $150 a month. So it's not a per user cost. It's just $150 flat rate per month. And then for each payment you capture and store, it's $2. We answered the one about Wi-Fi. The next little bit was, so will it sync all of the payments to QuickBooks? The good things is QuickBooks can access the tokens, and you can sync with with your system on the back end. So again, Leap can easily take those tokens and port them into. That's a kind of a weird way to describe it, but yes, it will sync over, and you can use QuickBooks seamlessly. John, in your experience, it sounds like that's what you're doing right now, and you have no issue with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely correct.
Cool. Awesome. And then one of the questions we have on here too was, are your installers going into Leap to get the signature for that final payment? So when you finish the job, it's all installed, you get that certificate of completion. Are your reps having to go get that final payment in the field, or is your home office charging that via the token?
No, absolutely. Yeah, the home office is charging it via the token. And we've got in our agreement that after substantial completion of the work is done, we would be able to, after the completion certificate is signed, we can charge, and the home office does that once the okay is given that the job is completed from the production manager or the field staff.
Awesome, perfect. I want to offer this out to anybody. If you have any last minute questions, feel free to drop those in now. While you do that, I want to mention, if any one of you guys is actively looking to use this feature within Leap, it's very simple. Just reach out to us at info@leap2digital.com. And what we can do is we can actually get you set up with your account manager. We can also make the introductions. I'll actually personally help you guys on a lot of this. If you need an intro to one of our partners, we're more than happy to intro to you one of our partners, just like we did with WorldPay and John. We can do the exact same thing for you. Having that conversation, even if you're happy with what you're doing now, have the convo. See if they can get you lower fees. If that's the case, awesome. It's a couple more bucks in your pocket and you're PCI compliant. So if you're interested at all, or if this is even on the tip of your tongue, like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe next year, have the conversation. Let us make the introductions. Shoot me an email. I actually monitor the info at leaf2digital.com. It's very easy for me to take that, make the introductions to our partners if need be. And at that point, you guys can look to see if not only you can get the lower fees, but we can tell you exactly what it takes to get this thing up and running. And John also alluded on time frames to get this thing going. If somebody wanted to turn this on, they could have the conversation tomorrow with one of our partners. They could look up their fees within a matter of minutes. And at that point, get them plugged in, synced, and have this feature turned on in less than a week. So again, when John mentioned it's not a very heavy lift, it's not a very heavy lift. So without further ado, I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining. It's been a pleasure to have you here. John, I cannot thank you enough, and you better be damn sure I'm going to be sending you guys some t-shirts. Thank you so much for joining us today. Go ahead.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, again, thank you guys also for joining on the webinar. This is going to be recorded, so if anyone watching this is wanting to act on this, feel free to reach out to info@leaf2digital.com. For those who did attend, we will reach out to you guys just to make sure everything went well, see what your experience was on the actual webinar today. You should also get a copy of this in email as well. So looking forward to working with each and every one of you. Thank you so much as well for being part of the LEAP family. If you're not part of the LEAP family, also reach out to info@leaf2digital.com, and we're happy to get you guys going at any given time. Thank you again. John, you have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your week. And cheers to a nice, productive credit card processing year for all. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.